Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Raptor Queens Podcast, the first ever all-women podcast covering the Toronto Raptors. My name is Sarah Khalil. I'm here with my other queens of the North, Allison Hope and Essie Magic. Unfortunately, Sonali Sharma is traveling today, so she's not with us today, but we'll be back next week. I'm going to, sort of a little bit welcome myself back. I was gone for the last couple of weeks, traveling to Mexico City. I am back, and the world has changed. What is going on? Okay, so as everyone knows, about a year and a half ago, the Raptors played 2 games against the Sacramento Kings and the Utah Jazz, and by a year and a half, I mean 5 days ago. But it feels like it's been forever, because since that time on Tuesday night, the NBA suspended the season, it looks like, for at least 30 days as a result of the coronavirus. Despite all of this, we do plan on continuing our recordings and talking basketball. So this is all very weird and surreal. And it really does feel like we've entered some kind of time warp. And the games that we played only 5 days ago really feel like a long time ago. We are still going to cover those games and get into it. I'm sure people are actually really wanting to talk about basketball, hear about basketball, and not only ever hear about this virus going on. Of course, we will touch on that too, because there's a real impact, obviously, for the entire league and, of course, impact on the Raptors. There's some stuff to talk about. We're going to start by talking about basketball. Yeah. So as I mentioned, the Raptors played 2 games this week. The first game they played on Sunday. They beat the Kings in a very, very close game, 118 to 113. And then on Monday, on a back-to-back, they beat the Utah Jazz 101 to 92. That ended a 5-game road trip where the Raps went 4-1. And let's talk about it. So Allison, maybe we'll start with you. What was your take on our Raptors games this week?
So I called the Sacramento game a loss. I had to go on a limb, and I thought, based on how well Sacramento had been playing in the month of February, but it was a close game, and we really won on the strength of our 3-ball. We shot 40% from 3. Sacramento shot 26% from 3. And a couple of the things I noticed, Norm with 5 assists and Pascal with 5 assists. So really some playmaking starting there. And that's a big change in Norm's game, where he can recognize contests and make the pass out of them. The other thing, which was nice, was OG had a nice little mid-range jumper. So if he can develop that part of his game, this is going to be, an exciting development. Serge back with his sore knee, playing 36 minutes, double-double though, and just another day at the office for Serge. It was a really good road win, and we showed a lot of composure and resilience and just belief in the system. It was a good win. As far as the Utah game, 101-92, last game of a 5-game West Coast road swing. That was absolutely a character win. Everyone would have understood if the Raptors had lost that game. It would still have been a successful road trip. And this team just did not stop fighting through injury and fighting against a very talented Utah team. They came in with a game plan, and it all went out the window with about 1:35 into the game when Norm went down. The team regrouped. They did not lose their determination or their composure. Kyle with playing 42 minutes. Pascal, a double-double, actually nearly a triple-double, 8 assists. So again, recognizing when to make the pass. And Serge, again with a double-double. And I guess we held Utah, I was reading somewhere, to their 3rd lowest point total on the season. So, and I read an article in Bleacher Report this morning, and we are apparently top 2 in deflections and steals and top 4 in recovered loose balls. So that really says a lot about our defense. So I was wrong. Great week, though.
Awesome. Thanks for going into such detail. Essie, what was your take on the last 2 games?
Adding to Allison saying she was wrong, it's a perfect opportunity for me to point out that I was right. so ironic and funny because the one week where I was the most optimistic one, because I'm never the most optimistic, I'm usually just kind of realistic. And the time that you guys were like opposite, or Sonali was opposite, she was actually being realistic. That's the one time where I happened to like my optimism like won. So I just thought that was so ironic and funny because I was even worried about it. I was like, oh no. And then when Norm went down, I was like, oh man. And then, they pulled it out. Definitely a character win, like Allison mentioned. I'll touch a little bit about the Sacramento game. Definitely a good win considering that Sacramento has been on a momentum type of play, I guess you could say, just because they're fighting for that 8th seed in the West and they've been playing well. It was kind of a weird game just because we started out really good in the first quarter, high energy, lots of fast break points. And then we proceeded to lose a 12-point lead. And then the game swung in Sacramento's favor. And of course, Kyle Lowry being as great of a leader as he is, put the team on his back, got the game close at the half. And then, the game overall, it was a little bit closer than I would have preferred, considering if you look at the hot start we got off to, but I'm happy they pulled out the win. There was a specific play around the 5-minute mark, actually, that I believe Serge shot a 3-pointer over Giles. And it just reminded me of, I believe it was in the Philly series where Serge had this wicked 3-pointer. I don't remember who was over. Was it Ben Simmons or something?
Simmons. Yes, yes, it was. Step back right in his eye.
Yeah, and it was such a feel-good moment when I saw that. I was just like, oh, Serge, doing it again. So that was really, really good to see. Overall, though, happy they won. At the end of the day, it was a road trip, a West Coast road trip, which are always very tiring. So I was happy that they pulled out the win. And then the Utah game, of course, I was having that feeling like, oh my gosh, tired of all these injuries. It's starting to get really frustrating now. And I even started questioning, like, this might sound so weird and stupid, but I was just like, are the players playing too hard? It's not why they keep getting injured, because it's just like, and I know obviously we want them to play hard, but it's just, I just was at the end of my rope. Like, why do we keep getting so many injuries? Some other things is that Pascal, just a little thing about Pascal actually, is that I think he needs to work a little bit on not getting offensive fouls. I've been kind of like noticing it across several games where he tends to get a lot of offensive fouls, like not an excessive crazy amount, but enough consistently where it's like, I hope he works on that in the off season. Like some of them are just his forearm push, but some of them are like on a fast break, he's coming like a train and somehow expects to not be called for an offensive foul. So just something I made note of that I've been noticing over some time. Something funny that kind of happened was Matt Thomas, he had missed this point blank layup at around the time when he first came in. I think it was the second quarter. And it reminded me of the Golden State game because he had missed a point blank layup in that game. And so then I was kind of like, well, no wonder he only shoots threes. But then later on in the game, he was making some good layups. Like he had some cuts to the basket from Lowry. He was playing in the paint a bit. And I thought that was kind of cool. Obviously, Serge did really well in this game against Gobert. I think Gobert only scored like 6 points. So very proud of Serge in this game. And what was interesting, too, is that Serge was being the peacemaker. And it just kind of shows his growth that we've seen from him, because he used to be the one fighting all the time, and he was the one who was pulling OG away. And there was even another moment where Kyle was getting frustrated, and Serge was just like, you could just kind of see he was like, it's okay, like kind of like pulling him away type of thing. So that was really interesting to see. Again, also with Serge, happy he's been shooting threes. It really helps space out the floor, especially when Norm is not playing. So when Serge is making threes, I mean, I feel like that's when we're not, I don't want to say unbeatable, but that's when you know the Raptors are on point and it's going to be hard to beat them. If Serge is making threes, if Norm is making threes, like it's tough to beat them. Other than that, there was one other point that I thought Jack Armstrong made about McCaw late in the game, and something we need to keep in mind in the playoffs whenever they happen, or if they happen, is that he had, Nick Nurse had Pat McCaw in, I don't know if it was around, he brought him around the 2-minute mark, but it was towards the end of the game. And the moment that Pat McCaw came in, the player that was guarding him then would double Pascal. So it's something that we have to keep in mind for the playoffs. And I know that Nick Nurse obviously likes to play McCaw, but in a playoff series, teams are going to obviously scout our players, pay attention to them, and they're going to know in advance, oh, this guy doesn't really shoot, doesn't like to shoot. So we can just, kind of sag off him a little bit, So just something to think about. I thought it was a good point that Jack Armstrong made. And then, of course, Matt Devlin's his name is Kyle Lowry moment at the end. Again, Kyle was playing amazing, being super clutch, putting the team on his back. So overall, happy with the win. Even Matt Thomas was getting really key rebounds. So love the fact that he's doing other things than just shooting. Happy with how the 2 games went, and obviously that my predictions were right, and that we beat an over 500 team, because that's something that's always hanging over our heads, that we don't beat over 500 teams enough. So happy we beat a really good team.
Well, and I'm very happy for you that you were accurate in your predictions, Essie. Good for you. Well done. Yeah, so, oh my gosh, you guys made so many good points, and I want to comment on so many of them. I guess I'll start with the Pat McCaw thing. Yeah, I mean, just no respect being given by the other teams for his offensive production, largely because there isn't a lot of offensive production. And you're right, the way that teams are playing defense and how they're adjusting for him when he's on the court is just to not guard the shot, because it's probably not going to happen. So I guess what I would hope is that Nick Nurse would have some sort of counter adjustment, which is suddenly Patrick McCaw becomes this amazing offensive machine because he's left wide open all the time. Let's see what happens. That seems optimistic. There was one play at the beginning of I can't remember if it was Sacramento or Utah, to be honest, but there was this one play where he set a screen for Lowry at the 3-point line, and then they just did a screen and roll, and then Lowry went to go take the 3, and Patrick McCaw actually did this really Lowry-esque move of using his body to block the other guy from coming up to challenge Kyle's 3. Anyway, I was like, hey, that was a real Lowry-esque game-winning or play-winning move. So I like that one a lot. Other things that stood out to me is the clutchness of this team. Kyle and Pascal in particular, at the end of these close games, just closing them out and being comfortable to just take the ball, shoot the ball, make sure the ball goes in the basket. The end of the Sacramento game, Norm, same thing. It was being really clutch. So I actually really like that our team has a lot of players that you can rely on at the end of the game to likely hit a shot or a clutch shot. And that would include Fred VanVleet, who obviously wasn't playing either of these 2 games. Marc Gasol only played in the Sacramento game, came back for the first time in a while after he had his injured hamstring, and came off the bench, had limited points. I think he shot like 1 for 5, had about 2 points, or maybe it was a 3. It looks like it was a 3-pointer. And I mean, I think because he's just coming off the bench, like the bench was terrible, just terrible in the Sacramento game. They combined for 7 points, and every single one of them was in the minuses. Patrick McCaw at -17, Terrence Davis -10, Matt Thomas -8. So yeah, I mean, it was just not a good game for the bench at all, and the starters were 100% the reason why they won that game. And then to see Norm get injured again in the Utah game after being named the Eastern Conference Player of the Week and having him go down with a rolled ankle. The only thing I said about that was the F word, and I still say that. But it looks like perhaps it wasn't that bad. He walked out of the arena not on crutches and not with his ankle in a boot, and also now he's got some time to recover. So I guess we'll see what happens with that. So yeah, that was the game. Anything else y'all got to say about those games?
Well, I guess, Sarah, to your point, the whole team has a whole bunch of time to recover now.
Yeah, and same with everyone in the league. Do you guys remember when we were doing our playoff predictions maybe 3-4 weeks back, and I was like, okay, and the Raptors were slated to play Brooklyn. If we kept this standings as they were, Raptors would be number 2, Brooklyn would be 7. And I said, oh, but what if KD comes back and he's not injured anymore, and then he comes back and then we play KD in the first round? That's like a real possibility now. What? Especially if it's delayed till like July or August.
Yeah, that was prescient of you.
Well, I don't want to be right about that.
I heard about that. Like, people were bringing that up too online, that like, oh, if it gets pushed back too much, then there's a possibility that KD and Kyrie could decide to play, and then it's a whole different series. So yeah, I definitely am worried about that. I mean, I did see online that it will be a minimum 30-day suspension, and that they'll reevaluate from there. So I'm hoping that they will, I don't know, it won't be that long, but it probably will be longer than 30 days, realistically speaking. But I think anything that where they resume into July, August gets really sticky, even with the next season starting too, because that's getting right into the next. So yeah, I definitely am worried about that. And not just Katie and Kyrie, like all teams' players are going to now have time to get to recover from injuries, which is also obviously bad for the Raptors. I mean, it's good for us in terms of our injuries, but we play good regardless of the injuries, to be honest, for the most part. So, but with other teams who struggle with injured players, it's an advantage for them for sure.
The other thing that just occurred to me is that we have to factor in the Olympics too, if they go ahead. So I believe they're in August. So that makes the timeline even more tight.
Oh, yeah, but players are almost guaranteed to prioritize the NBA over the Olympics. So I'm not, it would impact the Olympics. You're right. I didn't even think about that till right now, Allison.
I mean, I know that some of the players were planning to play in the Olympics, like even Steph Curry, who had missed most of the season, he was still planning to play in the Olympics. And Kevin Durant hadn't ruled himself out for the Olympics either. So it was definitely something that was on their plate, but they might have to like change their mind now and prioritize with this change.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's come back to this in a little bit. I mean, I one of the things that I'm curious about is the how the players stay mentally and physically prepared and at game level over this stretch of time. Let's come back to that in a minute. Before we get into any of that discussion, though, I am wanting to hear from each of you about your Kings of the North and your Court Jester of the Week. So let's just keep our regular segments going for the next little bit here. Allison, who is your King of the North this week?
Now, I think I'm starting to sound like a broken record, but I did pick Serge Ibaka. He came back the previous week against Golden State and laid down a double-double. And this week against Sacramento, 36 minutes, 15 points, 10 rebounds, 5 assists, and 2 blocks. And then Utah, 37 minutes, 27 points, 3 rebounds, 2 assists. He did shut Rudy Gobert down, but then you have to wonder maybe if Rudy Gobert was sick. His minutes are a little bit worrisome, but just I mentioned before how much he's developed his game. And it's surprising because he's deep into his career now. I mean, we expect Pascal and OG to develop, but we really didn't expect Serge to expand his game at this point in his career. So now he's basically a legit double-double threat. He can hit from mid-range, he can hit from 3, and he can make the pass. So my King of the North this week, Serge Ibaka.
Okay, great. Real testament to the coaching staff that they can keep getting more and more to Serge Ibaka. So yeah. Essie, who is your King of the North?
So my King of the North this week is going to be Kyle Lowry. So I feel like sometimes we're so used to seeing how Kyle produces and Pascal produces that it's almost like it just becomes their normal. And it's like it doesn't stand out to us anymore, even though technically they should be, getting some kudos and getting King of the North. He knows when it's time for him to take over and try to get it into the paint. And so he's just been doing that all this while, but I felt like this week especially, it was really noticeable. And also he did have the stats to match. So in addition to being a great leader, Against Utah, he had 21 points. I mean, his field goal percentage wasn't as good, 38%, but Utah is a really, really good team, so keeping that into account. 7 assists, 3 steals, and plus 15. I believe that was one of the highest on the team that day. And then against Sacramento, 30 points, 66% from the field, 8 assists, again, 3 steals, plus 16. So he was great in terms of just being a good team leader, being clutch, but also had good performance stats-wise. So that's why I chose Kyle Lowry.
All right. I am going to echo you, and I completely agree. I think Kyle Lowry was amazing this week. 2 plays stand out to me, one in each of these games, both at the end of the fourth quarter. Kyle Lowry, pull-up three-pointer. And in the game against Utah, that was the killer. It was the one that just took the heart of the team. Like, it was like a close game. Anything could have happened in that final minute and a half, and Kyle Lowry hits the 3, and that was the end of the game. And then in the game against Sacramento, Raps are actually down by 2, I think, with about a minute and a half left. Kyle Lowry, pull up 3, take the lead, boom. And I was just like, oh, this is beautiful. This is just so classic Kyle Lowry clutch ball. And I 100% want to acknowledge him as the king of the North this week too, Essie.
Yeah, and in case you forgot, his name is Kyle Lowry. Just in case you forgot, we can bring it up over and over again. His name is Kyle Lowry.
I love it. I love it so much. Okay, and quickly before moving into the Court Jester, Allison, she's been running our Twitter account, and you may have noticed recently that she has been retweeting Too Much Hoops, TOO_much_hoops. And Too Much Hoops, they've been doing a breakdown of the Raptors' defensive plays in various games over the last little bit, and it is just such an excellent analysis. And right now, all of us are just starved for basketball content. Highly recommend you check it out. He did a breakdown the other day of the Raptors' game 1 against Philadelphia, and how the Raptors are playing ball. And one of the things that really stood out to me is Kyle, and like how he moves on defense, and how fast he is, and how committed he is, and like just like no one is hustling like he is, and how friggin' smart this Raptors team is in terms of when they decide to cheat on the player that is that has the ball, when they move off the pick and roll and either drop back into the paint or stay up on the guy. Like this is such an amazing defensive breakdown. I learned a lot just watching even that one. I think if you're listening to this, you'll really enjoy watching those videos, and it's excellent, and you'll really appreciate the Raptors defense after that.
Yeah, that's a fantastic piece. And like shout out to Will Liu for shining a light on Brad, because he's doing really good work here. And this is, these are images that we can't necessarily pick up, even like with slow motion, like replays after like a play during like the live broadcast. So this is like an excellent tool for basketball people to learn.
Yeah, it's been really cool. Okay, so back to our Court Jester of the week. All right, who this week to you was just kind of like off or weird or funny or whatever it was? Essie, let's start with you this time.
So sometimes Terrence Davis II plays so well that we forget that he's a rookie. This week we were reminded he's a rookie because he was just out of sorts. Oh my goodness. I don't know if it was the road trip taking a toll on him. I think it was, and it was just like, it's time for this guy to go home because he was not playing good. He had no points in either game, and he was just out of rhythm, and Nick Nurse recognized it early, which is why he pulled his minutes. Even in the few minutes he did play, he was minus 15 against the Jazz, one of the worst on the team. He was just not good. So unfortunately, I had to choose Terrence Davis II.
All right, thank you. I'm going to actually just jump right in. I agree with you. Essie, me and you, we're just on the same page this week. Exactly what you said. Okay, Allison, over to you.
Just to go back for a sec, I wonder if the rookie wall is a thing, maybe Terrence Davis is hitting it now. So I did see what you guys saw there as well.
I saw an article saying something similar about the rookie wall and thought, yeah, that could be it. Anyway.
He'll benefit, honestly, from this break as well, because he's not used to playing this long of a season. And I think, he might be hitting that sort of wall because we were at the tail end of the season.
Yeah. Allison, did you also pick TD, or do you have someone else?
I did not. I went with Pat McCaw, and I know there was a lot of discussion, like all over Twitter and in the Toronto media about his playing minutes. And Nick Nurse, I mean, it's obvious that his fellow players and his coaches, have faith in his defense and his skill set, or maybe that's what they're saying to the media. But 1 for 3 from the floor against the Kings. He played 17 minutes. And then against Utah, 43 minutes, but I think that was largely because of the injury to Norm. But 2 points in 43 minutes. So I think when the playoffs come, McCaw's pretty much going to drop out of the rotation. I see him being used specifically for defending inbound plays, or just for short clock defensive scenarios. So I think we're probably not going to see as much of him in the playoffs if they were to happen. So unfortunately, I went with Pat McCaw again for Court Jester of the Week.
As much as I would love to have faith that he would drop out of the rotation in the playoffs, I don't know, man, because Nick Nurse just loves to play him. So I'm not even though it's so blatantly obvious that he shouldn't be playing, I can't even be that confident that somehow he's going to have barely any minutes, or the type of minutes we would prefer him to have in the playoffs, because I don't know, Nick Nurse just he loves.
Oh man, I hope you're wrong, Essie. Oh.
Okay, but I was going to say exactly what Essie just said. I would love for his minutes to drop in the playoffs, and I don't think they're going to. I think Nick loves him.
But if they're going to shade off of him and double who's ever the threat in the paint, or send extra coverage to the shooters, that's just not going to work. I mean, that's going to be an easy scheme for Nick Nurse to switch up.
Knowing Nick Nurse, though, he's probably just going to tell him to actually shoot more instead of lower his minutes.
Maybe, you know what? I don't know. Maybe it's a secret weapon. Maybe it's we're going to make your scouting look like you should all just ignore this dude. And then I don't know. You know what? Forget it. All of this is hypothetical anyway, because we don't even know what's going to happen with the playoffs, or if the playoffs will happen, or when they're going to happen. So let's kind of go back over this direction now. So as most of our listeners probably know at this point, Rudy Gobert was the first NBA player to be confirmed positive for testing positive for the COVID coronavirus. And the Raptors had played Utah on the Monday. Serge Ibaka, after Rudy Gobert shot the free throw, Serge Ibaka kissed the basketball. So there was a bunch of worry that maybe any one of the Raptors was also infected, or their traveling party. They were all tested. It came back negative for everyone. I guess they're waiting on the results of one more at the time that we're recording, but it seems like for the most part, the Raptors did not contract the virus. So that's good news. And really good news because, Norm Powell, he had a bowling event, and Nick Nurse's band was playing somewhere when they came back to Toronto. So anyway, before all this social isolation stuff kicked in hardcore, these events were still happening. And now the players are basically at home playing video games. And I don't even know. Guys, what do you think it's like to be a Raptor right now, dealing with this suspension?
So is it safe to assume we're in tea time now, since we saw the Raptors playing video games?
Yeah, let's call this our tea time segment.
Okay, cool. So yeah, it's so funny because, it's not funny, but it's interesting because I was on Reddit, and some fan claimed they saw Chris Boucher at Loblaws or a grocery store.
I saw that.
Yeah, so it was a little bit awkward because I was like, aren't you supposed to be on quarantine? And then I started thinking, well, maybe he already knows his results are negative. And so that's why he was out. Apparently he was wearing gloves too, latex gloves. So that was a little bit odd, seeing that. But other than that, yeah, the whole incident of them playing, they happened to be the team who played Utah last since Gobert got his results back. And yeah, I think I'm just relieved. I'm just very relieved that none of the players had it. And also because of the events, like we mentioned, Norman Powell's charity bowling event, there were so many fans there, other personnel there, media there, that if any of the Raptors players had it, then now all those people have to be quarantined as well. And also at Nick Nurse's event, because I believe a lot of them then went to Nick Nurse's event right after. So it's just a relief all around that it didn't create that sort of multiplier effect or domino effect, I should say. But other than that, you know, it was still nice to see the players have fun together at the bowling tournament, especially after Norm's injury, seeing him out there bowling. It was nice.
So I just found this out. This was released an hour ago from Toronto Raptors Twitter. It says, introducing how hungry, and then crossed out, bored are you? So how bored are you? Episode 1, Mafuzi home gym. And it's Serge Ibaka in his home sharing about how he's keeping fit in his home. So y'all can check that out if you want to know what they're doing.
That's awesome. That was something I was wondering about. Like, how are these guys going to continue with their cardio? So I'm sure the guys in the condos, like, I wonder if they have their own like fitness equipment, because I'm pretty sure they wouldn't be going to the public gym. And I know that I've seen a video of the practice facility, and I think it's biometric access to get in there. So you have to put your finger on a pad to open the door. So, I mean, I wonder what measures are being taken, you know, to make sure that kind of stuff is clean. The other thing, I guess probably the guys with houses probably have their own courts, and they could do reps, but as far as the cardio, like, are you out like running in the neighborhood? Like the condo guys, like, I wonder how they're going to stay fit. Yeah, so
like Serge doesn't look like he has I can't actually tell. It looks like maybe it's a condo, and he's got a stationary bike. This is what I can see in this video. He's got a stationary bike. He's got these, like, I don't really know. You know, in track meets when you have to leap over the hurdle, it looks like he's got like 4 of those hurdles. He's got some weights, and he's got this thing that looks like a cushion. I don't know what it is. Anyway, clearly I don't go to the gym that often, but that's what he's got in his place right now, setting up. You know, the other thing I'm realizing is like how much fun in sports is about being able to prove that you're right about your predictions. And like the thing that is just hurting me the most is like, what if there's no playoffs and I can't prove to all of you that I'm right, that the Raptors would have gone to the finals.
Yeah, I'm sad for the players. Like, they definitely have something to prove this year. And if there's no playoffs, like, all this work and all this determination, you know, of course there's something bigger here, but that would just be a shame for this team really has something to prove.
Pretty much the notion that Kawhi Leonard carried the Raptors would just carry on again for another full year. We would have to keep hearing people say, oh, the time Kawhi Leonard carried the Raptors, because we wouldn't have had this season to prove, you know, that wasn't necessarily the case. And so that's kind of annoying, to be honest with you. Because even though we had success in the regular season, people were not going to be fully convinced yet until they saw some playoff success. So that's going to be annoying to have to deal with that if the season is truly canceled.
And heartbreaking too. Like this team is a special team. And I just feel like, oh man, they just deserve the chance to actually try something and go for something here. So, and then, so next question is, this is pure speculation, but I'm curious what you guys think. What do you think it's like mentally right now? How do you think you stay mentally prepared for potentially like at least a month off, and then coming back and not knowing, and like even returning? What do you think that would be like? I mean, this is a mentally tough basketball team, but what I know about them, at least what I think I know about them, is like they are focused on winning games, right? And now what? It's just this massive corruption.
I think I'd have to say probably the sports science team is going to have a plan for the players to, stay game ready. And once they're able to get into the practice facility and they can kind of replicate what goes on in games and scrimmages, I think that's going to go a long way. So this is unprecedented. It's hard to know.
So what I read online is that they're still preaching to the players about social distancing. So they're not actually allowed, I believe it was in the NBA statement, that they're actually not allowed group workouts at this time, but they will be allowed to have one trainer assigned to them who works with them throughout the week. So that's what I know. I don't know how that's going to affect them mentally, but at the same time, all the teams are going through it. So everyone is kind of at a disadvantage and everyone will kind of be at not a level playing field. But I feel like, obviously we're biased in favor of the Raptors, but I think it's important to remember that the other teams will have the same problems as well.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So speaking of social distancing, let's just move to our Around the League segment. We're going to start with Rudy Gobert. So just in case our viewers don't know, one of the things that happened is before the season was suspended and before people really started taking the coronavirus seriously, Rudy Gobert was kind of mocking the situation. He did a media interview and then he walked around and he touched all of the microphones and then cell phones, and then went back to his locker room and apparently was, touching all the players' gear and stuff like that. And then when we find out he has coronavirus. And so he issued a statement. It was kind of the trigger for the league being suspended. It says, "I want to thank everyone for the outpouring of concern and support over the last 24 hours. I've gone through so many emotions since learning of my diagnosis, mostly fear, anxiety, and embarrassment. The first and most important thing I would like to publicly apologize to the people that I may have endangered. At the time, I had no idea I was even infected. I was careless, and I make no excuse. I hope my story serves as a warning and causes everyone to take this seriously. I will do whatever I can to support using my experience as a way to educate others and prevent the spread of this virus. I am under great care and will fully recover. Thank you again for all your support. I encourage everyone to take all of the steps to stay safe and healthy. Love." So what do you guys think of that statement?
So, he came off looking like a little bit of a jerk at that end of the press conference there when he touched the microphones. So, there's, contrition. He pretty much had to say something like that. I think the players are in a little bit of a bubble and some complacency. In the States, they get, fully funded healthcare. They don't have to worry about getting sick, getting injured, everything's covered. So like in the States, not everyone has insurance and not everyone has those options. So I think maybe it was a bitter reality that this is a very scary situation for some people. And I guess he had to kind of come out and say something like that.
Essie, any thoughts?
So I actually thought his apology was good. I know some people didn't agree. Max Kellerman specifically on ESPN was saying he wished he would have spoken more about how he wasn't taking Gobert wasn't taking the disease seriously or the pandemic seriously. But I thought his apology was fine. I feel like he recognized that, he did something wrong and he obviously was very embarrassed. It was all over the news. They replayed that clip of him touching the mics over and over and over and over again. And he seems to know what he did wrong. And in any apology, it's, to me anyway, it's more about the person recognizing what they did wrong. And it seems like he does. And he apologized and, he said, let this be an example as a way to kind of educate others and prevent, people doing the same thing. And so I think it was fine. And it really did help not that he has to be the sacrificial lamb, but it did help in terms of the cascade effect that happened after this, not just in the NBA, but just everything. The moment the NBA suspended its season, every other, big sports league was suspending their seasons. Companies were closing more. So it's just, in a way, it did help people to take this more seriously. And I can tell that he he's embarrassed by what he did. So I think his apology is fine. And yeah.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it was an appropriate apology, demonstrated the level of maturity that you would expect for this, and good. And then we can move on from there. So, yeah. All right. And then the next part, Essie, maybe you can lead this bit. This is DeMar DeRozan being unhappy with the San Antonio Spurs. Why don't you take us away?
Yeah, so apparently, according to ESPN San Antonio, their Blitz podcast, DeMar DeRozan is not happy in San Antonio. I'm just going to quote what they said. DeMar DeRozan is not happy in San Antonio. The offense is not running smoothly as one should think with a guy like him in the lineup. You have to decide if you're going to take that money or come back to a situation that's just not suitable. So, I mean, I know this has been an ongoing topic for a while, but it appears to be coming to, its peak moment. There was also talk that if the Spurs did not give him an extension this summer, or mentioned that they were going to give him an extension, he was going to opt out of his contract. And he's currently making $27 million a year. So that would be a really big decision to opt out, which just shows the magnitude of what's going on over there and how he's feeling. So essentially, I guess what people are kind of wondering is like, is he making the right decision? Is San Antonio the right place for him? Should he move on? That type of thing.
Interesting. I wonder how much of his dissatisfaction, and this is pure speculation, is just like leaving a team that then won and kind of wishing and wondering what it would be like if you were still there and seeing what could have been. I'm just saying this about the Raptors.
I think that definitely I can see what if this turns out to be true, I can see what he's saying in terms of the offense, because the way that the Spurs offense runs, it doesn't allow for a lot of isolation play. And that's where DeMar DeRozan shines. And so, I mean, obviously he's now in the West, so for things like All-Star, he's up against so many people. But I think it's blatantly obvious. I mean, even if you look at his points production, it's gone down since he's gone to San Antonio, and he's just not getting the same recognition he used to get. And they're also losing, which also always makes things worse. So, I mean, I could see why he wouldn't want to play there. Plus, he, in the back of his mind, he has to still be attached to Toronto in some way, and what they're experiencing now, what they experienced last year. So I could see why to him the grass is looking greener somewhere else.
I wonder if the luster of Greg Popovich is starting to wear off a little bit in San Antonio. I mean, the first year, LaMarcus Aldridge was not happy there either. So now there's discussion about DeRozan wanting to go. I guess it's he has to kind of consider if he's willing to take less money and go somewhere else. And when I say take less money, it sounds like the cap, next year's salary cap, is going to be affected by the revenue from this year or the lost revenue. So if he's going to take less money, it might be significantly less. And the other thing is, would he be willing to come off the bench? So, he's definitely a character player. He has flaws, chiefly that he doesn't play defense, and that he only plays in the mid-range in the league now, where the three-point shot is a preferred shot. So, I mean, if he would be willing to come off the bench, I could see him in New Orleans, like a veteran, proven scorer, or in Miami maybe. I just wonder about their cap situation. So he'd have to be going to like a young team that already has some three-point shooting, because clearly he's not going to offer that. But I mean, he gave us the best years of his career, and maybe there's a spot somewhere in the rafters for his jersey as well.
Yeah, so I don't think he's at the point where he should be coming off the bench anywhere, if I'm being honest with you. But I do agree with you that, yeah, he needs a team that is not going to be expecting him to shoot threes. And also, he has to play better defense no matter where he goes. The direction the league is going in, the teams that win play defense. And also, like, despite the fact, in terms, like with me saying the direction the league is going in, I'm saying even though it's so offensive oriented now, and the scores are extremely high, at the end of the day, the winning teams still play defense. And so otherwise he can't be on a winning team, to be honest. Like, I just don't think, and people have already seen what happened in the playoffs with him, using the Raptors as an example. So why would any good team want him there when they see what he does in the playoffs, and he's not a a heavy 3-point shooter, doesn't play the best defense. So he's in a bit of a bind. I would take that $27 million, to be honest, and worry about everything else after. And even, speaking of the Raptors, people I don't know why they won't let it go, but people still keep saying, oh, he should come back to Toronto. And it's like, it's so blatantly,
no,
he will not fit in with Toronto. Like, Toronto is a complete, like, I know they say the 3-and-D player, but if you think about it, the actual whole team is a 3-and-D team. Like, every single player can shoot the 3, and except for Arande, obviously. And, Boucher's a little shaky. But every single player, for the most part, shoots a 3 and plays great defense. So even Matt Thomas, who no one expected him to play defense, plays defense. So he just would not fit in with the Raptors at all. So I just wanted to mention that because I know people have said that. But, I mean, other than that, like I said, I hope he opts in. I don't think he should opt out.
Okay.
I think he has to decide, do I want to win? Do I want to achieve something significant? Like, yeah, he's got to make a decision.
Mm-hmm. And also, too, if he stays opted in, then he becomes a free agent during the Giannis year. And that's the year that a lot of teams, I think, are going to be willing to do a lot more shuffling, because so many teams this upcoming summer, assuming however the season goes, they're a lot more rigid in their moves because they're waiting for the Giannis year, right? So even if he were to opt out this season, I don't think his options would be that great, because so many teams are worried about the Giannis year. And it's not just Giannis who's a free agent. There's a plethora of players who will be free agents that year. So he just won't have as many options this year either. But the summer after that, when Giannis is a free agent, that year teams are going to be, they're all going to see what Giannis does and Kawhi does and Paul George does and all these other players, that they'll be more willing to make a shuffle. And I think they'll have more options. So I think it's just better for him to wait.
Okay, then I'm going to bring up one more topic before we wrap up for the day. Speaking of former Raptors players, Vince Carter. Did he possibly play his last game with the Atlanta Hawks against the Knicks on Wednesday? That game was in progress when the league decided to suspend the season, and Vince Carter subbed in with something like 15 seconds left, I think, comes in, drains a 3. Was that his last game? I'm hoping not, but if it was, it's a crazy way to go out.
It could, and it was very sad. I wrote him a message on Twitter over it. Like, I was so sad about that, because honestly, Vince Carter's the reason I became a basketball fan. He's the reason so many people became a basketball fan. And I don't know, can you guys hear the sirens in the background?
A little bit.
Okay, I'm just waiting for it to go by. And yeah, it would have been nice for him to have that final goodbye in Toronto, because he still had that one Atlanta game to have it in Toronto where he was going to have his final farewell. And it's just sad. If this is his last, if his season ends like that, it's just such a sad way to go. And I'll always remember everything that he did for the city of Toronto and the country of Canada, and how he changed basketball in this country forever. So yeah, I hope it's not the last, but if it is, we'll just have all the memories, and hopefully he gets honored in Toronto some way down the line.
I don't think there's any way that the Raptors would not arrange for some way to honor him, even if it's not actually at a game. I mean, their tribute videos, first of all, Raptors have some of the best tribute videos in the league. But yeah, I think you're right, Essie. I'm with you. I mean, you and I think, are from the same time and generation, and Vince Carter, it inspired basketball for me. That was why I care about it at all, is because of him.
Guys, I just have to jump in from a different perspective. So I kind of became a fan despite Vince, and my views on him have changed a lot over the years. I mean, clearly he inspired a generation of basketball in this country, but he kind of said his goodbye already with a towel over his head, sulking on the bench the last year. So again, my feelings have changed a lot about him, and I'm sure Toronto will do something good for him, but like as far as a tribute, but yeah, not everybody sees that the same way.
Well, I don't know. I thought it was one of those things. I was really hurt by that too, especially probably because I loved him so much. So seeing him be that way in his last year was awful, and I was so angry with him. But it's like now looking back in retrospect and seeing that, like, had Vince Carter not played for the Toronto Raptors, would there still be a Raptors team? And I genuinely don't know if the answer.
For sure.
Yeah.
Well, also too, I think that, like, if you actually go and do the research of what really happened and how the management treated him, because I agree, I was on that train too. I was one of those people calling him Vince Carter and all that stuff during the time. So I totally was very disappointed in him. But once I really dug, deep and looked at a lot of the things that management did to him, the false promises they made to him, and, the fact that he had changed his mind about wanting to leave. And I forget his name, Rob Babcock, the GM of the Raptors at the time, still pushed through the trade, even though Vince said, no, I want to stay. I want to work it out. And that's one of the things that Sam Mitchell revealed later, was how he really regrets not escalating that to, Larry Tannenbaum or somebody, because we all realize how terrible of a GM Babcock was anyway. So there's so many things that go into that, and I personally forgive him for what happened. And some things you can only appreciate in time. And as we've seen over time, he's created generations of Canadian basketball players in this country. And even when he was still here, he was one of the first players to actually say, I want to be here. He was our first big name player to change the notion that no players want to play in Toronto. When he re-signed with us, that was monumental, especially coming after the year that Tracy McGrady left. Like, he really, really changed things in this country. And even if you think about some of the things he actually did, at the time, seeing a player who genuinely cared about the city and loved the city, like, that's very valuable. And the things he would do, he used to do charity basketball games where at the time it was called Air Canada Centre. Air Canada Centre would sell out his charity basketball games. He did it 2 years in a row, and he would invite players from around the league to come and show off Toronto. And I see Sarah smiling. I can go on a rant about Vince Carter, everything he did. He would invite players around the league to come to his charity events just to recruit them, to help them see how great of a city Toronto was, and try to get them to come over. People just, recency bias, unfortunately, is very prevalent. People just forget every single thing he did for us. And for a player to do that at that time when the Raptors were being shunned, look at Alonzo Mourning, didn't even show up. Like, it's just, what Steve Francis did in Vancouver. It's just, I don't know how people can't appreciate what Vince Carter did for this country. I really just don't know how.
I certainly see that now, and I will admit I can be very petty and vindictive. And I mean, I'm coming at this from the viewpoint of having been a Leafs fan, and there can be no higher dysfunction in sport than that franchise over the years. And I'm reminded of the Zamboni driver most recently. So I don't want to go off on a whole rant, but for sure, my views on Vince have changed. And again, he's done so much to further the sport of basketball in Canada. So I think it's just the pettiness in me that made me come out with that comment.
It's okay. I just think it's like, when we look at his full body of work, like, especially in terms of at the end of the day, now we're getting to the stage of deciding whose jersey do we retire. And these decisions are not to be taken lightly. They're not to be taken and, oh, we were mad at him just this one time. Like, just when you look at his full body of work and the impact he's had, even years later, people are still wearing Vince jerseys. I just think you got to just, like, let it go. And not you specifically, Allison. I'm now ranting to every single person who said that. But I just think, like, looking at his full body of work and his impact, you can't deny that he deserves some acclaim from the city of Toronto.
For sure. And now we have like competent leadership and, Masai Ujiri, and whatever decisions that are going to be made, I'm sure will be done with some class and some distinction. So I have no concerns there.
Awesome. Well, Vince, if this was your last game, congratulations on an outstanding career. Very long career, the longest. And just thanks so much for what you've done for basketball in Canada, basketball in Toronto, and we wish you nothing but the best. Okay, so that will wrap up our podcast for today. As a reminder, as I said at the beginning, we are going to continue to record. Go ahead, Esty, what do you want to say?
Yeah, I wanted to add that I'm very excited that we're going to keep talking about the Raptors during this break that the league is on, and that we will have really juicy topics, and we're going to be really debating all the stuff that we don't get a chance to debate about because we always keep it game focused. It's going to be me versus Sarah, and then Sarah versus Allison, and then Allison versus Sunal, and then everyone versus Essie.
Gloves are off.
This is perfect. Okay, well, now I'm really excited. Okay, great. So make sure you tune in. Don't miss us. Follow us on Twitter, on Buzzsprout, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, all the places on the internet. Follow at Raptor Queens. You can follow us individually. You can find all of our handles on our Twitter account. And we so look forward to talking to y'all again next week. And stay safe, stay healthy, and stay Raptors fans. Mwah!
Yay!
We the North!
Okay.